Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. This is it. This is the big one. Manchester United travelling to Brighton for the final game of the Premier League season. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Joe Smith.
Last game of the season. Another season up, another season down, Jay. It's not been great, has it? But here we are. We've made it to the finish line. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree on everything you've just said. Yeah. I mean, we're going to get into it in a minute, and by all means, get involved in the chat and the comments. But it doesn't exactly fill me with excitement, this last game. Everything is just about the FA Cup final for me, and I'm struggling to sort of focus on what this even means.
Well, I think, as people can see above there, Europe is one part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And weirdly, we've got two chances at Europe here. One is for the Europa Conference, and then we've got the FA Cup final for the Europa League.
That's what I mean. It's like the Europa Conference as a carrot isn't much of one, summer.
A carrot bow cup.
Nice.
Let's talk about the Europa Conference a little bit.
Okay.
Technically, it's possible that we finish sixth, by the way, but that would mean having like a 15-goal swing on Chelsea, so that's not happening.
Okay.
It's us and Newcastle. If Newcastle drop points and we don't, so we'll get seventh.
Okay.
Technically, we could get sixth, but we're not.
Impossibly.
Do you want the Europa Conference, or would you prefer nothing?
I would prefer nothing to the Europa Conference. I don't mind the Europa League. I like that tournament as a second prize if you can't get into the Champions League, and we've had some good games in there. I went to the Nou Camp last season to play Barcelona. Obviously, Stockholm was one of my favourite nights as a Red. There's been lots of good memories, and you get some big teams in there. You can get teams like Milan and Barcelona and Ajax and teams like that. We've played them in the Europa League. Europa Conference, me and you were sitting here the other week going through the teams that are in it, and half of them I never even heard of.
No.
And the ones I had weren't exactly the creme de la creme. I mean, you're scraping a little bit, aren't you? So I feel like you ask yourself that question, how would you feel if you won it? If you won the Europa League, you'd be buzzing. If you won the Europa Conference, I think a party'd just be like, okay.
I've changed my mind.
It's like a lesser trophy than the League Cup. The League Cup's a major trophy, but it's the sort of the smallest one of the big ones.
You're wrong, Jay.
And I think the Europa Conference is worse than that.
You're wrong.
Why?
I've gone the other way now.
Have you really?
Yeah. When we read those names out, and there was stuff like, Captain Birdseye FC and AmazonPrime.com FC.
It was like, at that point, it was genuinely like Quitco Tyres 11.
Yeah,
like,
it was work
what
teams,
is this?
It was pub teams. It was like Manton Colliery.
Yeah.
It was like, However, I'm expecting a squad next season that's going to have a lot of youngsters in it, whether that be academy players, whether that be a slight tweak in sort of transfer policy.
Yeah.
I want those players to have a sort of a ground.
You want them in Eastern Europe on a Thursday night getting absolutely battered, because that's how you bring players into a squad when they're young.
I want them playing games that are maybe slightly lower intensity, slightly lower pressure than the Premier League games. If it's clear from the start that obviously we're going to play, Bruno's going to get a game, and Martinez is going to play and Rashford will play. But if we make it clear from the start that this is a tournament where we try things out tactically, where we give people games who need games, where we rotate and rest, all of a sudden people aren't going, oh my God, United lost to da-da-da, because we rested players, we rotated, we clearly, I'm not saying don't take it seriously, but let it be a chance where Ahmad this season could have started 20 games by now if he'd had a Europa Conference run at the start that allowed him to show how good he was. That could be the case for maybe a Harry Amas next season, maybe a new transfer next season.
We're going to get into our predicted 11s in a little while.
Yes.
But we're in a position where we've had midfielders starting at centre-back.
Great.
And we haven't been in Europe for 6 months. And you're not concerned that we might end up in a scenario where we're struggling to put a team out for the Premier League, and then we've got to go to Estonia on a Thursday night and find 11 players for that as well? For a tournament that even if we win, no one's going to give a toss about.
Here's one. Why don't we just write to the Premier League and say, can we just play the last game of the season next year? Because Jay's worried that people might get injured. Football is about watching games, man. It's about the pool of talent growing, learning, experiencing what it is to fly to Latvia, Albania, Turkmenistan.
Yeah.
These are the places where the likes of Harry Amas will cut his teeth.
There you go. 17-year-old Harry Amas thrown in as our only fit defender.
Over in the eastern side of Russia. He's basically, the guy's basically in Canada.
Yeah, he's in Siberia.
Yeah, he's further east than North Korea at this point, and he's plying his trade. And obviously, I don't get filled with excitement the idea of winning it, but I think being in it could be a place for Ten Hag to try things.
Let's move on to the next topic, which is Audition.
Yes.
Yeah? there's the FA Cup final, which I keep banging on about. Every time I'm on a video, I keep going on about it. It's consuming all my thoughts. It does feel like this Brighton game is an opportunity for certain players, not all of them, but certain players to put themselves in the manager's mind for the FA Cup final, and some big names as well, because they're not just talking about players like maybe Sofian Amrabat and Amad Diallo, maybe even someone like Marcus Rashford might need to prove himself. And I mean, it does sound a little bit crazy that a player got 30 goals last season might need a game against Brighton to show that he's ready for the FA Cup final, but he's not been having a great season, and the manager might be looking at it going, who's going into this FA Cup final in a bit of form?
Yeah, I think Casemiro's another one. Because by the time that cup final rolls around, hopefully Martinez, we'll get to predict 11s, but hopefully he'll have either come on as sub or started the next game. He'll be ready to start.
Yeah.
So Casemiro's pushed out the back line already. Then, like you said, Amrabat's fighting for a place.
Yeah.
I think Mainoo's got to start. Bruno ain't going anywhere. So how does Casemiro fit in the midfield?
No.
If he puts in a good shift against Brighton, looks a bit, maybe sort of changes his game slightly, drops off a little bit more rather than diving in, he's one as well. Like, there's a lot of players here. I think there's probably 5 players who are guaranteed to start that game.
Yeah.
I think the goalkeeper Onana, I think Wan-Bissaka, I think Johnny Evans, Bruno Fernandes and Kobbie Mainoo. For me, they're the only ones who are guarantees. Højlund is probably a 6th. But after that, it's like anyone's guess, especially, like you said, those big names. Rashford, how could you imagine 12 months ago that he might not start this game because of his form? It's incredible to think about, but here we are. I think he needs a big game against Brighton. He does.
No, I agree. I think it's where he's at, and I was saying this after the game the other night, exactly what I said. I said, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was actually on the bench for the FA Cup final. I know he's got a very good record against City in the big games as well. But if you look at that performance we're putting against Newcastle, I thought Amad Diallo looked on it. Yeah. Is Garnacho going to get dropped? Is Højlund not going to get a start? I'm not so sure. Get involved in the chat in the comments and let us know your predicted 11. Talking of predicted 11s, give us yours, my friend.
Yeah, I've made a couple of tweaks to the one we saw the other day, but it's quite similar. 2 people in particular keep the place, obviously, as you can see there, Amad and Amrabat.
Yeah.
I think it's probably just too soon for Martinez to start, but ideally he'll be getting another 45 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, whatever, in the second half, so he can be ready to start for that cup final. It's good as well, there's a full week between this game and that game, so it's 3 or 4 training sessions. He'll be, another week away from his injury, so hopefully, even with 40 minutes, he'll be able to start. But the couple of differences, I've given Garnacho a rest. I think he just needs it. I think we're seeing a little bit of he seems to be sort of reaching for things a little bit. His game doesn't seem to be coming quite as comfortably to him at the minute. I think that's just fatigue, personally. I brought Rashford back in, I've brought Højlund in, and I think it's going to be something like that. I don't think the back four is going to change. I think the midfield, Mainoo has to play, Bruno has to play, Amrabat can't be dropped either. It's whether Rashford even comes in, but I think he probably will.
Yeah, I've gone for a very similar team to you. I agree with everything you've said. The only difference I've done is I've actually taken out Kobbie Mainoo and brought in McTominay up, kept McTominay in. I just think Mainoo could do with a bit of a breather. I think he did well against Newcastle, obviously got his goal as well, and we know the quality he's got, but he is going to start the FA Cup final. I can't imagine him not doing. No. And I just think a week before it, give him a bit of a rest. He's another one who's just been running to the ground. He's only 19. He's only just turned 19, and yet he plays almost every minute of every game. I think he needs a rest. Going into this City game with a little bit of a rest under his belt could do him the world of good. Yeah, let us know your predictions there. Brighton.
Yes.
I mean, they're a team that everyone sort of respects and admires, without being a team that everyone sort of fears. Is it safe to say? They're a good team, Brighton, but they're not a team where you go, well, that's it, we're playing Brighton this weekend, we're probably going to lose.
Well, weirdly, I think most teams in the league would say that, except us, who lose to them every time we play them. I know we beat them in the FA Cup semi-final last year, but first of all, it was on penalties. Second of all, they battered us in that game and really should have beaten us. And I don't think Ten Hag's beaten them in the league. We've lost all 3 games, haven't we?
Well, we lost away last season with the penalty, wasn't it, Luke Shaw with the handball. We lost the opening game last season.
Battered us.
The battle. And this season, I was at the Brighton game where after 15 minutes he made a bit of a tweak, De Zerbi, and they just kicked on. There was that sort of little bit of controversy as to whether the ball went out for Rashford setting up Højlund, but other than that, we weren't really in it. No. So no, you make a good point. I think other teams might look at Brighton, the record speaks for itself, that they are beatable, but Manchester United having a right old time of it recently, aren't we? And then Brighton were a team we used to beat. It wasn't like Brighton were unbeatable. We beat Brighton after the full-time whistle went, and it was a draw.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I do.
And now it's like they're our bogey team. So, listen, stop Danny Welbeck. You stop Brian.
Yeah, and they've not
even
been
if he doesn't start, sometimes he doesn't.
They've not been as good this season as they have been in recent years, and I think a lot of that's down to injuries. They've got Ferguson, Matoma, Milner, Van Heck, Estupiñán and March all out or probably out.
Yeah.
Some big names in there for them. And I also think they have been hurt a little bit by just constantly selling all their best players. Eventually it catches up with you.
Yeah,
like it
we've
has
seen
done
that
with
before.
Southampton and Wolves and other teams like that in the past who have pushed on and then lost a lot of players. And it looks for a minute like they're going to keep it going, and eventually they do drop off. But it's their style of play that catches us out. High pressing, really pushing hard, really high work rate. It's not the same style, but that same kind of energy that we've seen away at Newcastle a couple of times that City sort of have as well, where they're just on you and they don't let up. Brentford did it to us as well this season. So we've got to be careful, and hopefully we're not looking too far towards the FA Cup final and we don't put in a performance here, because I think that Newcastle win and a Brighton win, that's a nice little ball roller for the cup final.
It is, and it's against teams that are like respected and doing all right as well. And you've not just beaten two teams that are already relegated or whatever. Newcastle, obviously in the top half of the table, same with Brighton. So it's a big if we can get those results, then we can get a result against Brighton, I should say. We've already got the one against Newcastle. Then that gives us a little bit of momentum going into what is obviously going to be a very difficult game against Manchester City. Joseph, give us your score predictions, please.
I think it's going to be really tight. I'm going to go for a win, but only because I think we'll just manage to scrape something. I like what Ahmad was doing. I like what Bruno was doing.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to go 1-0 Manchester United.
I hope you're right. I'm going to go 1-1. I think this stinks of a 1-1, but obviously I want to see a Manchester United win. Send us your score predictions. Film yourself in landscape, and send it to paddockmatchday@gmail.com, and we'll use that as part of our pre-match build-up. Just a 30-second score prediction, and we'll use that as on our show for the watch-along. We're going to be here for that, aren't we?
Absolutely.
So make sure you are hitting like, share, and subscribe. That's been Joe Smith. Go and check him out on the Sloppy Joes. You know where to find me, Jay Moy. This has been a preview for the Brighton game, the final game of the Premier League season. Thanks for watching.